everybody? This is Sanchez Humble. Welcome. We're doing a Radiohead tier list with Jack. Jack, how did you introduce yourself?
We'll just use Jack.
Jack. So we've decided to have a showdown where we're going to rate all of the Radiohead albums and tell you guys which ones are the best with logic and facts. Right?
We're gonna destroy this tier list ranking. And we're gonna have Tristan's and we're gonna have mine, because I think it'll be fun to see where they intersect and where they don't. I feel like we'll agree on a lot, but there's also, as Tristan knows, I have a lot of very strong opinions about music that I like. So I'm fascinated how that'll come out. And just to establish it beforehand, from my perspective, I'm coming at this both from a mix of my personal tastes, aka what do I actually want to listen to in my spare time, and what I think is objectively better or worse music. So I'm coming at it from a mix of those two.
Yep, that sounds like you. And I'm going at this as, this album's good, makes me feel good. This album doesn't make me feel good. So I'm gonna let you figure out which logic is a bit more succinct there. But I think we're gonna figure this out. So why don't we get right into it and not keep you guys waiting? So Jack, Pablo, Honey, how do we feel about this one?
Well, I have a bit of a soft spot for this one because it was my first Radiohead album. My dad had it on CD. Yeah, my dad had it on CD, and I grabbed it to play it in my car because I needed CDs to play in my car. So that was really my first introduction to Radiohead, apart from a couple of songs that I had heard sporadically. And people talk about this album as like the redheaded stepchild of the Radiohead discography, and they really look down on it. And even having listened to the rest of the discography and, fallen in love with all of the other Radiohead albums that everyone loves, I still really like Pablo Honey. And I think it is a very quality album, and it would have passed as a quality album even if Radiohead never came out with its much better stuff. That being said, I don't know how high I can really rank it. It's very simple melodically. And there's so many like G and C and D chords, so Radiohead were definitely operating from a much simpler musical catalog at this point. That being said, there's plenty of interesting Radiohead-y moments on it, and I think it is still a very listenable album overall with a ton of catchy songs. So realistically, I'm going to put it in the C row, just right in the middle. It's not quite on the same level as their later stuff, but it's not a bad album. Anyone who says this is like a bad or mediocre album, I think, needs to smell the coffee a little bit. It's not a bad album. I find it thoroughly enjoyable still.
I'm smelling it for you right now, Jack. It's you're right, but Pablo Honey is, for me, it's one of the last Radiohead albums I actually listened to, because unlike you, my dad actually used to put on Kid A when I was a kid. He used to put that shit on the car, and we would listen to like Idiotech and Morning Bell. And it wasn't until honestly, this is really embarrassing to me. It wasn't until yesterday that I listened to it in full for the first time, because all I knew was Creep. Everyone's like, "Oh, Creep, Radiohead." That's those things go together like bread and butter. But when I put it on, I was like, it's kind of mildly surprised by the first couple of tracks, but it wasn't until like Vegetable that I was like, oh, this is actually decent. This has like some nice surprises, like lots of distortion. You could tell that Nirvana was still really popular at the time, and they were probably trying to riding the coattails of grunge a little bit. But
yeah, every band that came out at that time was being marketed as the next Nirvana that had a rock edge to them. And I think Radiohead kind of approached that sardonically on this record. Like, on Anyone Can Play Guitar, Tom York is clearly like mocking sort of the rock star thing. But then you watch him on MTV Beach House with blonde hair, and he's just like screaming that song and then diving into the pool, which is hysterical, by the way, if you've never seen it.
That's Anyone Can Play Guitar, right?
Yeah. It's overall a weird era in Radiohead's career, because they were still definitely kind of finding themselves a bit. But some of my favorite Radiohead songs are on this, like Lurgy, which I think is one of the only ones they've ever like revisited live in the years since. is a really beautiful song. I love Vegetable. I Can't. Thinking About You. You know, there's genuinely good songs on here that are just a little too simple for people who've grown accustomed to the rest of Radiohead's catalog because it's so out there. So if you're willing to digest something a little more simple, you know, give Pablo Honey a shot.
How does the track list go? It's like Vegetable, Prove Yourself, I Can't. It sounds like you're trying to talk to a vegetable and it can't, and it just, no matter how hard it tries, it can't impress you. It's like the poor thing.
And it starts and ends with sort of more out there songs like Blowout and You are definitely have something that made them stand out a little bit, even from some of the other alt rock bands at that time.
All right, but in regard to my rating, okay, so everyone's probably going to get a little upset with me, but because Radiohead is such a fucking good band, and for their standards, like, normally I would probably rank this like a B tier album, but for Radiohead standards, it's going to go in the D tier for me. Because that might shock a couple of people, I don't know. I hope that doesn't piss off too many people.
I felt like most people would put it in the F category. I thought I was standing up for it. Put it in C.
I don't think
I almost put it in B, but I needed one of the future albums that I'm going to talk about to be in the B tier by itself. So I was like, it got bumped down to C. So
there's not much to say about Pablo Honey for me because I don't have as much history with it. Now, after this album is when it starts getting a little bit more interesting for me. So
I'm not going to make a lot of friends with the next pick.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm ready to make a whole fucking party, Jack, so let's get this one started. So, The Bends, 1995, right? 95?
Yes.
96? Yes. Tell me how you feel about this one.
To put it very simply, I recognize that this album is a huge leap forward for the band musically. They start writing songs that are a lot more interesting. It has some much more emotional and poignant cuts on it. That being said, they had not quite gotten out of the Pablo Honey musical aesthetic. There are still a lot of very straightforward chords and stuff on this record. And, you know, speaking in terms of Radiohead's discography, it's like a bridge record. It brings you to their much better later discography. But with all that being said, I just think there is a huge crop of really weak songs on this album. So as an entire experience, I almost pretty much never listen to this album. Like, I probably haven't listened to this record since junior year of college. Just because I can count on one hand the amount of songs that I want to keep from this record, and there's a bunch that just if you put it on, I'm not going to turn it off, but I don't revisit it. So I have to put it in the same tier as Pablo Honey. I put it in the C.
All right. So that's very Fantano of you, Jack. And the way that you're judging these albums is like one listening experience, which is fair. And I feel like I'm doing it more like how many highlights are on this and how good are those highlights?
And there are more highlights, but there are just records that go in the other tiers that are much better than this one as a whole thing. Just quick shout out, Planet Telex, still one of my favorite Radiohead songs. I still remember the first time hearing the chorus where they're doing that E major 7, E dominant 7 chord progression, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And, you know, Tom York's melody over top of that, great. Fake Plastic Trees, still one of my favorites. Street Spirits, great, but like I said, like Nice Dream, Bones, Black Star, Sulk, like there's a whole crop of them that I pretty much never come back to.
Black Star, Street Spirit, Just, High and
frankly,
Dry,
High and
Fake
Dry.
Plastic
I don't
Trees.
listen to I don't come back to High and Dry a whole lot. I used to listen to listen the hell out of that song, but
yeah,
I don't know. That one's lost its taste a lot with me.
That's such a nice, simple pop song in E major. That's what I love about it. It's like got a nice, catchy riff. It's upbeat. It's not like other Radiohead songs that make you want to kill yourself. But instead, you're like, Like,
we could have a whole different list for the saddest Radiohead songs. Which one makes you want to kill yourself the most?
Probably Videotape. But that's
yeah. We can say our choices for that when we get to those.
Look, the thing about Radiohead, The Bends, is I didn't listen to that until much, much later because I stood right in the middle of their discography. And what I like about The Bends is, like, unlike Pablo Honey, you can still feel those weird chord changes and chord progressions that Radiohead was beginning to experiment with. Like, there are some nice highlights on the track with High and Dry. Fake Plastic Trees, while a very simple song, is just... Tom York's falsetto really, like, serenades you in a way that you never really got in the same way on Pablo Honey, and then it gets you excited. Like, every time I listen to the Bends, I'm like, oh, I want to listen to OK Computer next. It kind of feels like a New Hope into Empire Strikes Back. I always kind of combine those albums together when I listen to those two, and I don't know. There's just
I think it runs. I think I would agree with that for at least the first half. It really runs out of steam in the second half.
Now, I gotta remember the track listing. I'm such a
I mean,
with names.
You have My Iron Lung, which I really like. It's got that he's
riff.
using that weird octave effect on his guitar, which still sounds really cool today. But again, it's just among kind of a heap of lackluster songs. But it definitely, on the first couple tracks, you got some classic Radiohead ones.
Not lackluster, Jack. It's a good album.
Well, I mean,
and I'm going to stand my ground. They
even admitted that this came out of a deep period of writer's block, and I think that kind of shows that there were some great sparks of inspiration on it, but there's also kind of some parts where I'm like, okay, they don't have many great ideas for this, so...
God, you
just
even,
as
like,
a whole thing, when I look at my Radiohead records, it's not the first one I'm reaching for to listen to.
You even did your
That's
research
my hot
on, like,
take
the
for
making
the
of
day.
the records here.
Is putting
That's
Benz,
your hot take.
Is putting Benz on the same level as Pablo Honey.
I'm gonna put Benz. Oh, man, it's difficult for me. Probably B tier.
Okay,
probably B tier.
That's as close as you could get without deeply offending me. It is not an A tier record.
No, it's because there are better Radiohead records, but I feel like you're a lot harsher with it because there are moments on the record that are less memorable. Like I don't remember. Like you said, Bones. I couldn't play that in my head if you asked me to.
Bulletproof.
Okay. So fine, Benz, B tier. For me, and C tier for Jack. But this is where things get a little bit more interesting.
Yes.
Now we're heading into OK.
This is where the meat of it. We've been getting the appetizers. We're getting to the meat of it now.
Oh, Jack, this is for the internet. This is like this is it. This is the album. This is it, guys. This is it. Right, Jack?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I mean, obviously, we're on to OK Computer now, and this was the first Radiohead record I bought when I was collecting. I think it was literally the first one. When my friend and I decided we were going to start collecting vinyl, he got Led Zeppelin 4, and I got OK Computer. And, over the years, listening to it a lot, I really think that it deserves pretty much most of the praise that it gets. I think front to back, it might be the most solid track list apart from one other Radiohead record that we'll get to later. And it's pretty much everything everyone says it is. It was way ahead of its time in terms of the themes that it's talking about in terms of isolation and, the technology era kind of creating a sense of, what would you call it? Disassociation. And musically, it was a huge leap forward from the Bends. No more straightforward chords, really. They really sort of stretch what they were doing previously and have all kinds of weird effects. And the production's great. The mixing's great. The lyrics are great. I'm not sure there's a bad song on it, really. For me, easy S tier pick.
Okay, we're going to put that in Jack's S tier. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to go wrong with OK Computer. Everyone's been singing its praises now for like the better part of 2.5 decades. So I don't have any major issue with this album. Like the moment you put the CD in, an airbag just hits you with that riff. You're like, oh my god, what is this? You know, with
the first time you hear it, you're like, is that a cello? Is that a guitar? Like, what is that? I thought
is
it
this
was
a
a cello.
Christmas song? No, the way that the percussion is composed on that song, is recorded on that song, it does kind of feel like wintry, if you know what I mean. It helps with the white album cover, so it's like the moment I put it in, it doesn't feel like as warm as like the previous two albums that Radiohead released. And highlights would go for I would go for like Paranoid Android, obviously, and Letdown. Letdown has got to be in my top 5 Radiohead songs easily.
Yeah, I think that at this point that stands out as the best song on the record for me. Just
Letdown?
the guitar riff that he's doing, the lyrics, the melody, the way the chords change, it's so good. And there were 2 moments from this record that I remember standing out, or let's say 3, standing out the first time I ever like got through the whole thing. One of them was Subterranean Homesick Alien, just because the chords and the effects on the guitar are so like otherworldly, and Tom singing about wanting to be taken away from this world just like struck me so much, I remember. Really? The second one is obviously Fitter, Happier, because the first time you hear that, it's like, what the heck is this? Like, I don't remember hearing something like that on any other record unless it was like imitating that. And the third one was, there's a moment in, it's like the transition from Climbing Up the Walls, that song, to No Surprises after that. You know, Climbing Up the Walls has those huge clanging drums, and it goes into that solo where there's like, I think it's like digital horns or keys or something going that are, you know, singing these crazy notes, and then it just completely crashes into this, you know, fuzz of distortion and like slithers out, and then No Surprises starts with that beautiful little ringing guitar. And just like every time I hear this record, I'm just as struck by that whole passage. It's just like, oh my god, what even is this? Like,
I'm gonna do a shameless plug. Hey, by the way, we covered No Surprises. If you'd like to check it out in the description. No, but seriously though, No Surprises has got to be like, it's a cliche answer. I think that's actually my favorite one on the entire record because of the, like, Tom is singing about a job that slowly kills you, and I think I listened to this album most from actually after I came to Japan and I was working a job that I really didn't enjoy, and it wasn't until after I changed jobs that I realized that I was using that album as sort of like as a therapy session, if you will, because Tom York just has a way of like striking that nerve of depression that we all kind of collectively feel as a species, and there's just, the album's a bit of a downer, but I think the ambient sound of the thing and how like it flows really nicely from track to track. It's always one of my favorite aspects of it. And exit music for a film.
Even that being said, you have the darker moments like that, but there's also really beautiful moments, like, you know, Lucky and The Tourist, you know, and No Surprises. It's like, even though it's a depressing thing, like musically, it's not that dour. There are more dour moments, but like even with that, there's tons of beauty to be found in the record.
I mean, I tend to like the dramatic cuts from this album a little bit more. I was just talking about like exit music for a film, how it's like it slowly gets more and more intense as the song progresses.
Which, by the way, I think Muse owes their entire career to that song.
Oh yeah.
When you hear exit music for a film, it's like, this sounds like every Muse album that has come out. I mean, obviously they were hugely influenced by Radiohead, but you know, if you had to point to one song in particular, it's that one.
I am about to piss off the entire internet though, because I think I'm going to put this album in A tier because it's really good. It's absolutely amazing, and it's
that hurt my soul.
I know it's gonna hurt your fucking soul. I know you're Mr. But it's perfect. It's a listening experience through and through. How could you not put it in the S tier? And the reason I put it in A tier for me is, one, this is a subjective experience. You enjoy art how you enjoy art, how you want to. It's your prerogative. But also, two, there's another album on this list maybe even 2 other albums on this list that just like are even weirder.
I know what they are. You're not going to be able to hide it from me. But I disagree with the idea that this one is not on the same level as those other ones.
I feel like they surpassed themselves. They outdid themselves. It's that good, but after this one, there's one other album that just does it more for me. Just a little bit more. You know what it is. Don't say it. Don't say it. And for anyone in the comment section, please, yes, tear me a fucking new one. I know Jack has given his whole logical and well thought out preemptive counter argument to why this is the best album ever written. I don't care. I'm just a stupid dipshit YouTuber. What do you want from me? Thank you, Jack. It was nice listening to you give your whole spiel about how this is a great listening experience. But now we have to move on to Kid A. Let's talk about this one.
Which, can we just agree it's going right in the S tier? I mean,
yes. That we can agree.
Because, like, you really need to put this album in context. You know, I mean, after a thing like OK Computer, a moment like that, where they make something that so many people had never heard before, it stands the test of time as this huge, important work of music, and then it's like, what do you do after that? Well, if you're Radiohead, you just say, let's do something so not similar to it, like something completely different. And right. Anytime in art, you'll sort of get this sense as I talk about some of their later records, anytime a band of Radiohead's stature is trying something different, I have to respect them a certain amount for that. And I will give records a lot of credit if I feel they're trying something truly original and different. So, I mean, Kid A, probably the most otherworldly album they ever did. I mean, when you're listening to that, it's like, I feel like I'm not even on this planet. It's just
right.
Such a great run of songs. I mean, when you hear stuff like Tree Fingers and Kid A, and they just have this completely otherworldly feeling that makes time feel like it's frozen, and you're just sort of observing everything, and it's just cold and empty. It's just this weird feeling to describe, but definitely one of the most solid track lists. I mean, there's a run of songs in here. I gotta pull it up. That
everything in its right place. How to disagree completely. For me, I already mentioned that I used to listen to Idiotech a lot when I was a kid because my dad would put it on as I would hang out at his work when I was younger. But like, there's also everything in its right place, and the way that song just slowly builds up and feels like an anxiety attack. It's like what thinking sounds like, Jack. Like
one of their best chord progressions,
definitely
on that electric piano.
I've always liked what is it? The National Anthem. The National Anthem. That's a good one. What is it?
Yeah, that bass line. That bass line is just something else.
You can't go wrong with that fucking album. Like, there's not a single track that I will skip when I put on Kid A. Like, everything in its right place is a perfect thinking song. How to Disappear Completely is it's also another like kind of a downer track, and then like In Limbo and Motion Picture Soundtrack and Kid A, Tree Fingers, Idiotech, whatever. There's just
and you know, coming from a statement like that, coming from a mainly guitar-based band until that point, was kind of nuts. And the fact that they survived making this album, you know, I've heard all the stories about, you know, Ed not feeling like he had a place in the band anymore. He's like, okay, we're not doing guitars anymore, so what do I even do, you know? And right. You know how tense it was when they were making the album. It's amazing they even came out of this. But the fact that they tried something so bold and so different just has my eternal respect. All of that being said, some of them I do think are better. I often don't listen to Optimistic when I'm going through, just because it interests me for whatever reason a little less. But that first 5 the first 5 songs on that record might be one of the best runs in one of their albums that they ever had.
It's just
Kid
nothing
A, National
sounds
Anthem,
like
Tree
it.
Fingers, just something so insanely good.
It really encapsulates like the band as a whole for me. Like there are bands that you always can compare to another band. Like I can listen to many modern rock groups and say, oh, this sounds a little bit like The Cure, or I can hear a bit of Smiths, I can hear a bit of Joy Division. But regarding Radiohead, it's very difficult to point to another band that sounds even remotely like them. It's like they really found like a revolution in rock music with Kid A that it almost still sounds like the future of what rock music could be if we'll consider it rock music. And that's why I put it so high on the list, because like OK Computer, while exceptionally well written and there's not like a bad track on it, it's not as revolutionary for me in the same way that Kid A is. And I know that's a difficult argument to make, but the fact that there are so few guitars on Kid A is what impresses me probably the most.
Definitely, but give OK Computer credit for how many bands came after that were just trying to sound like that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's just I wish,
especially Muse and Coldplay. Like early Coldplay, I'm talking about like the first couple EPs and then the first record are so Radiohead. Like they were literally just trying to sound like Radiohead.
I believe
it's kind of crazy. But the thing with Kid A, it definitely didn't come out in a vacuum. When you go and you listen to Aphex Twin from that era, Come to Daddy, and Drugs, stuff like that. I think Drugs came out after this one, but those sounds didn't come from nowhere. Like I think Tom York said Aphex Twin changed his life, and they leaned in such a heavy electronic direction after hearing that, and you can definitely hear that on some of those mid-90s Aphex Twin things, but still, just as a statement for a rock band to make, definitely, that's what sets it apart.
Yeah, it's interesting how after they made this album, they kind of went back to their roots a little bit with the next one. Speaking of which, we've already decided that Kid A is S tier. We finally agree. I think that's the only one we've agreed on so far.
That's the only one we've agreed on so
far. Which is, I don't know if that's a bad thing, but the next one is Hail to the Thief, which, by the way, I don't know this one as well.
No, next one is Amnesiac.
Oh, that's right. The B-sides album.
You forgot about Amnesiac like everyone else does.
I forgot, because Amnesiac is it's basically just the other side of Kid A that they didn't release.
Well, let's call it what it is. It's the leftovers of Kid A, and it really sounds like that. Here's what I'll say about Amnesiac. It's got some great highlights. I like when they do stuff that's more dissonant and kind of out there, like what is it? Let me find that song. Polk Pull Revolving Doors, or I Might Be Wrong, stuff like that. But it, like I said, it definitely kind of just sounds half-baked compared to Kid A. Like some of these ideas were not sort of realized to their fullest potential. And as a listening experience, it's kind of mid for me. It's almost like as mid as like The Benz is kind of for me, but just in terms of, how experimental it is and the fact that it tries all these different things, I got to give it a little more credit. So I would put it in the B tier, personally.
Okay, B tier. I got you. So let's go drag that into B tier. I actually think I might be a little easier on this album than you, because there are a lot of amazing cuts on this one as well. I mean, I might be wrong. I think that's what it's called, with that drop D riff kind of just droning all out through that song, and then Tom York just kind of like singing in that half murmur, half whisper the entire time. And
then there are those synths hanging in the back.
Exactly.
That are just like, what are those?
Well, and then what's the other one? I would put like You and Whose Army, Knives Out. Knives Out is actually one of my favorite intros to a Radiohead song, with like that boom, 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 boom. I always found that really genius, because it's another testament to how Radiohead can do so much with so little, even when they're on just a guitar.
That being said, it really loses steam in the second half. I mean, Dollars and Cents, Life in It, like Spinning Plates, Hunting Bears, just kind of stuff that was not worked on enough, and I hate the alternate version of Morning Bell they have
I
on
don't
this
like it
one.
either. I don't like that.
Compared to the
that
one
either.
on Kid A, it's...
No, that's fair. That's fair. And the thing I would say probably is without those first couple of tracks, like what is it called? Polk.
Pack like sardines in a crushed tin box.
Well, Pole Revolving Doors, I think, is the one where it's like.
Yeah.
That song, I have a soft spot for, because I used to put that on when I'd write my thoughts when having either when I was anxious or I was just contemplative about something important. And yet again, just like they did on Kid A, is they captured that sound of thinking. And the second half of the album, I barely remember. That's not a good thing. So with the good listening experiences, with the good listening experiences towards the beginning, but then like the forgetful second half, I would agree with you. So I'm gonna have to put this one in the B tier. So we also agree there.
And then we get to an interesting moment that I literally had not heard Hail to the Thief until like a few weeks ago, just because I feel like maybe next to King of Limbs, it is like the least talked about Radiohead album.
Yes.
And it's interesting why that is, because after having listened to it, I just thought, that was really solid. And what I think works in its favor is that it's a bridge between the Kid A era and the In Rainbows era, in that they are fleshing out sort of their more melodic stuff a bit more like they would on Kid A, but there's also those sort of very jarring electronic experimental things on there, like what's that song? The Gloaming and hold on, let me pull it up.
So I thought we're talking about King of Limbs now, right?
No, Hail to the Thief. Backdrifts.
Oh, we're talking about Hail to the Thief.
That's what it is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Backdrifts. That's the other one I really like. But yeah, it's a long album. I think that kind of works in its favor. Like the band itself, I think, has said that they kind of wish they had spent more time on it and cut it down a little bit and fleshed out some of the ideas a bit more. But even with that idea, like, I think it's a very solid album. And, Sail to the Moon, Sit Down, Stand Up, They're There, Mixomatosis, like, those are all really solid songs. And this is like, if The Bends was the first major, like, bridge record they had between points in their career, this is like the second major one. Like, this is a perfect bridge between their Kid A, Amnesiac era and the In Rainbows era.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good album. I've always really liked 2 + 2 = 5 and There There. We actually tried to do a cover of There There, but then you told me that the guitar parts were like really insane or something.
Yeah, I could not. I hadn't heard the song before, so like I could not learn those on first listen.
Nah, it's all right, man.
But overall, on my list, I would put it in the A tier. Like, I think I think it's definitely better than The Bends and Amnesiac.
Okay.
Not quite on the tier of their best stuff, There's a couple duds, but very solid record, and I'm surprised more people don't really talk about it. I don't know why it's kind of been forgotten among their records, after having heard it. I guess it just doesn't get talked about enough, but it's pretty good.
I mean, I guess to put it simply, like, the way that I listen to albums is I usually listen to an album once, and then I put on the tracks that I remember, because when I'm on the go and I'm on the train, I don't want to have to listen to a whole album again with all the tracks that I was like, it's all right. Just like the collection of what I really enjoyed. And Hail to the Thief has, I think, 3 of those for me. It has Sit Down, Stand Up, There There, and 2 + 2 = 5, and then the rest of it I can't remember very well. I remember enjoying the whole album as an experience, and the highlights on this one are actually pretty freaking high. There's really few Radiohead albums that I don't enjoy, but like this one would definitely be higher than Amnesiac for me, where like most of the ideas are pretty well fleshed out. The melodies are solid. It's a bit more sporadic and compared to like their previous records. Like you could tell that maybe some of it was I don't want to say improvised, but like if you listen to the second half of 2 + 2 = 5, like that shit goes hard, man. And they hadn't gone that hard probably since maybe OK Computer, because Kid A was like less of a rock album and more of like, you know, experimental collection of songs. So I don't know. Since it's I will say it's better than Amnesiac. This album is probably gonna go. I would say it's like A-, B+ tier, but we don't have that. So.
Yeah, if you could put it, but some of these records are leaning more one way or the other. Like Amnesiac is leaning more towards a C, but I can't put it in the C, and Benz is leaning more towards a B, but I can't quite put it in the B.
I can't put this album on the same
you can
level.
Just put it in the B. It's what you're itching to do. No,
I mean like since I put OK Computer in the A tier, it's like I can't. This can't compare. So I feel like I'm almost screwing myself a little bit in the way that I'm ordering.
See, that's why
these,
you gotta.
Hey, it's my first time, Jack. Give me a break. First time making a tier list, bro. I didn't do the planning. You're out here talking about how these albums were made and what they were thinking at the time. I'm out here thinking like, good, not good, okay, not okay. I need to. I'm just gonna put this in the title. Tantris gets his ass kicked by Jack. In regard to explaining the depth of all these tracks, but I guess that's the charm of it. But now we got to move on to In Rainbows. In Rainbows.
This is another one that I got to put into context because I was told a great story by a close friend of mine who produced some of my early stuff, and they're 20 years my senior, so they were around when all of these big Radiohead records were coming out and they were consuming music at the time. And the way he phrased it was, there was kind of a sense, at least among him and his friends, that, you know, OK Computer had come out and been this incredible high, like one of the best things a lot of people had ever heard. Then Kid A comes out, and a lot of people really like that now, but at the time, a lot of people really didn't like that record just because it was so out there. And then Amnesiac, if you didn't like the Kid A thing, you're definitely not going to like Amnesiac. And then Hail to the Thief is like, you know, it's good. It's not as good as OK Computer, though. So there was kind of this sense, especially in that several years gap between those records, that like, okay, Radiohead's never going to put out something as good as OK Computer again. Like, they're kind of just past their peak. And then this freaking record comes out and just is universally put among their greatest that they ever made. And they were more than 10 years deep into their career at that point. So I have to give it a ton of respect just as a second wind to their career. Because, like, imagine if at this point in their career they had put out King of Limbs. Like, maybe we wouldn't talk about them as much. You know, but the fact that this one came out and consistently vies for the title of, like, the best Radiohead album, you know, just puts it right up there. So this is an easy S tier pick, you know, for me.
So putting it in the S tier is like, is it after Kid A? Is it before Kid? I know that OK Computer is your number one, so
it's right up there with OK Computer. In the S tier, it's above Kid A, but I don't know. It depends on the day. I might sometimes want to put on In Rainbows instead of OK Computer.
This album. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this album is perfect. There is nothing wrong with this album. Body Snatchers? Come on. Reckoner? No, I mean, like, there's no way that you can fuck with, like, the chorus of Body Snatchers and then, like, what is your favorite track on this one? First of all, Jack, on In Rainbows.
It's always been All I Need. And
All I Need.
If I had to pick two moments from this record that really summarize the breadth of Radiohead's power just as a musical entity, it would be the outro of All I Need and the outro of Videotape. Like, just take those 2 moments, just how poignant and musically beautiful, and just like you can't even really put it into words.
This is the only Radiohead album. I'm gonna piss some people off here probably. This is the only Radiohead album that I have consistently, every time I listen to it, I do not skip one song. Not one. 15-step, videotape, Reckoner, House of Cards. Bro. Like, I don't know how they did it at this point in their career, but just like thinking about it, it makes me angry that people can be this good at writing songs. Like, I listen to them like, I want to do that. I want to be like that. I don't know if that's what makes you feel like, Jack, but...
No, it definitely brings out that musician jealousy. And
oh, yeah.
Gotta give a shout out to the production. This might be the best sounding Radiohead album in terms of the recording. The recording is so natural and just crisp and pristine. And the mixing is great. So sonically, it really just, sits up there with the best and, among the best rock records ever. That being said, when I listen to it, I usually skip Nude. I don't know why. I don't care for that song a whole lot. That's my other hot take for the night.
Isn't that the song that took them like 10 years to write, even 15 years?
I thought that might have been, it was either Nude or Videotape. I think they struggled with a lot.
Yeah, there's like because I'm pretty sure, I might be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure Nude has like a demo that they recorded for OK Computer and that they never put on the record because they didn't like the composition of it. But that song is really good as well. If I'm getting that wrong, you can roast us in the comments, I guess. But
yeah, we're lackluster on our Radiohead history.
Just In Rainbows, man. That is the one. This is the one. This is an unfuckwithable album.
I'm not sure I would say that there are perfect albums, and that becomes a bigger question of, is there perfection in art? I might lean towards no, but this might be next to OK Computer the closest they've ever gotten to perfection.
Don't deny my feelings, Jack. This album's perfect. I don't care about your logic. It's subjectively the best album ever made. There, I said it.
I mean, no, I can't argue against people who, praise this record.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we agree on this one. I know OK Computer, like, it hurts you a little bit. It's just OK Computer doesn't have the same, like, the eargasm experience that I get every time I put this one on. Like, Kid A doesn't even come close. Like, that is how far I would put this album in, like, triple S tier if I could.
Needs its own tier.
It needs its own freaking tier, man. That's how I feel about In Rainbows. But I'll stop gushing. Just, if you haven't listened to this album, 15 Step, you need to listen to 15 Step. That percussion / like dance music-esque intro, the drop D riff of Body Snatchers, the beginning of Reckoner and Videotape. If you're gonna listen to Videotape, you also have to listen to like the demo that they recorded of that before. I actually like the demo version of that song more than what they released on the album itself. But okay, I gotta stop. This is my favorite Radiohead album.
And you gotta watch the video for Jigsaw falling into place where they're all wearing bicycle helmets with cameras in their face, and it's hilarious.
I gotta stop, Jack. I gotta stop. I could spend like 4 hours on this album. Okay.
All right, we're moving on. And we're moving on to what I think is by far the least talked about Radiohead record in their entire discography.
Last night was the first time I listened to this album.
And this morning was the first time I had heard it too.
Okay, so we're gonna have trouble.
I just avoided it because, like, the word of mouth around it is so non-existent. Like, nobody talks about this record. So
no one.
Yeah, why are you gonna bother at that point when you're dealing with, like, In Rainbows? But basically, what I'll say about this record, it is a very interesting experiment. It is up there in terms of experimental with stuff like Kid A. Maybe not sonically, but just the way they structure the songs and all of that, and these very sort of looping, weird ways. And, it's something you're either going to you're either gonna, I don't know, I guess you're gonna kind of like it, or you're gonna never listen to it again. And I mean, after having heard it, it's like I'd probably listen to it again. I think it had a couple really strong highlights. I think the song Codex is very, very beautiful. Had a very nice piano progression and great Tom York vocal performance over it. But, you know, if you were going to skip one Radiohead record, it's like, you could probably get away with skipping this one. I don't think it's bad by any means. I don't think Radiohead has put out a bad record in their career. I don't know if, you know, it's like my gut would put it in the C, but I don't know if it is, I don't know. It's riding C and D for me, so I'll just put it into D to make this more flashy.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, hold on. So, I'm about to make people mad. I'm about to make the whole internet fucking mad. So I just listened to this yesterday, so I don't remember the names very well, so I have to look at the names again. But this album slaps. I actually really like this album. And the reason I like it so much...
I don't blame you.
I think it was Morning Mr. Magpie. It might have been Morning Mr. Magpie, or it was, what the fuck is the third song? I don't remember what it was, but like it's the textures on this thing that really got me going. There's so many weird things going on. Like Codex is great. Then there's Give Up the Ghost, which is like very haunting.
Separator is great. The last song.
The reason this album is not as well remembered, I think, is because there aren't many hooks. There aren't many hooks on it. It's more just like them experimenting with a lot of weird shit, and they were like, you know what? We're Radiohead. We can do what we want. We already made Kid A. We already made In Rainbows. We already made OK Computer. And this is them just kind of like, all right, we're going to show you what we do when we're having fun, when we're just enjoying ourselves. Like, look at Lotus Flower. Look at the music video of Tom York just like freestyle dancing. And clearly he doesn't know what he's doing, but he doesn't give a fuck. And I feel like that's a perfect visual representation of the mindset they took when they recorded this thing. And I'm going to put this thing, this is going to piss off a lot of people. I'm going to put this thing in B tier. I liked it. It's not as good as Hail to the Thief. It's like more like B- tier, but it's better than C. It's like the lowest you can put on B tier.
While we're talking about it, I think I might put it in C. Maybe just a leg up from D. It's a C leaning towards the D for me, but no, I agree with a lot of those things. Like, I thought it had a lot of interesting textures, and you know, even if you hate it, it's only 37 minutes. So, like, how much can you actually hate it? Like, it's not like an hour and a half, you know, nightmare that you have to sit through. You know, it's just kind of a little stark piece where you go, here, you either like this or you don't. So
right. I mean, I know I was just surprised because I was expecting like, this is the bad one. This is the album that no one talks about. And I put it on and I'm like, oh, this is good. It's nice. It's like a good record full of B-sides in a way, because it's not as strong as their other records, but perfectly good. In fact, I would say this is the one record that I would listen to as an actual album every time. I feel like it needs to be experienced as an album a lot more than... Look, every single album deserves to be listened to through and through. But like I always go back to individual tracks and put them on playlists because that's just how I am. I'm ADHD as fuck when it comes to music. But for this one, because it feels like a one solid experience, it doesn't do a justice to the rest of the songs if you don't listen to them in the right order. And I don't know, I've really no logic backing this up, but when I go back to it, I need to have that one holistic listening experience again. But yeah, not much to say. Morning Mr. Magpie, I think, is my favorite track on this one, with like the guitar, if I'm getting that right. But I don't know, if you don't have anything else to say about this one, we can move on to the last Radiohead album.
An album that I think I pretty consistently called my favorite for a long time.
Really?
Probably not nowadays, but a record that definitely represents that Radiohead has not lost their edge or their creativity or their skill in any way. Maybe after King of Limbs you would have thought like, oh, they're kind of crap now, but no, this record shut them all up. And I think overall incredibly strong track list. I think True Love Waits as a closer is one of the most beautiful songs they have ever done with that arrangement. And you got the more ambient stuff like Daydreaming and Glass Eyes. I really like the quiet, mellow, ambient Radiohead, and that is all over this record. So, amazing production. I love the cover art. I love just the whole feeling of the record, just how icy and alone it is, and a lot of the more experimental stuff where they're, trying these different textures or rhythms, and I think is an incredibly strong front to back listen. So this one, A tier for me.
And A tier probably in front or behind Hail to the Thief?
In front of.
Okay, yeah, and I actually made that mistake.
Stronger overall than Hail to the Thief.
Yeah, no, I mean, this one, I don't know a Moon-Shaped Pool quite as well as the other records, but there was one moment, I mean, everyone was listening to Burn the Witch with Tom York walking from, like, some hallway in some, like, unknown place to the mountains in Switzerland, and he's just kind of, I think it might have been daydreaming, actually, not
No,
Burn
that's
the Witch.
daydreaming.
It was daydreaming. Yeah, it's a video about daydreaming and walking all around the world, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. But the highlight on this one, actually, with all of its iciness and very just like depressing and heavy themes that Tom York both sings about and the way in which he the vocal performances and everything are all also very like heavy. The Identikit's end, the end of that song with Johnny Greenwood's guitar solo. I don't know if you can hear it in your head, but the way that he just layers all of those tracks with like the delay and the tremolo is probably like the coolest sounding guitar riff that Radiohead had made probably since it's not really saying much, since In Rainbows. And I remember listening to him like I want more of that section of this song. I feel like there could have been a lot more of that, but it was much more of like a classically driven album with songs like Glass Eyes and
Johnny really shines as an arranger on this record, probably more than any of their other records. By this point, I think he had done a couple films, so he was in the strings mood. So his strings are all over this record, and they are so good. That's what makes me furious as a musician, is how good Johnny is as a composer and an arranger.
Yeah, I mean, he's
And just, again, another production shout-out. This record is incredibly well recorded. It's very quiet in a lot of places and very real. Like on True Love Waits, you have like that very otherworldly piano, but like Tom's vocal is so... like, it's, first of all, completely untouched. There's no editing or auto-tune on that at all, because he's kind of out of pitch in some of it. But that almost, like, adds to it. Just because it's, like, that's such a heavy track emotionally. And just, like, I can always just see it, when you hear that. Just, like, him with a microphone in front of him, and he's just letting that out. There's no, like, they're not touching that, So it has, like, that purity. And just such a beautiful record overall.
I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about it. I mean, yeah, Johnny Greenwood's always been like one of your biggest inspirations for guitar. I feel like I've sometimes heard that in the way that you play. Although Johnny's...
Yeah, he's on his own level, Yeah, not a technical guitar player, but it's just the what he chooses to play and when.
Well, it's like what Billy Corgan said. Radiohead was like one of the last big bands to do anything new with the guitar, and Johnny Greenwood is always trying to find ways to use that thing that I guess one would never even think of normally. So, yeah, I mean, he deserves all the credit that he's gotten over the years. I mean, regarding this album as an experience itself, I don't listen to A Moon-Shaped Pool quite as much. It's still fantastic. I like the production on this thing and how it's so like ambience and kind of feels like you're walking through the middle of like a blizzard by yourself. stranded, unknown where you're going to go. But then this thing is like comforting you. Like you could imagine yourself abandoned somewhere in the ice cold, and it's just kind of looming in the background as you're on your journey to find civilization, you know?
Yeah, it's the most ambient of their records by far, and I think that's probably why I gravitate to it a lot, because I love ambient music so much.
So, I know this is going to be... I don't... OK Computer, there's not much that you can really say about OK Computer culturally, and I feel like it deserves the A-list, the spot in the A tier for me. And I'm not going to put Moonshaped Pool above OK Computer for that reason. But it's still a really fantastic record. It's well composed. It's easy to listen to. It's emotional. It's genuine artistry that like I feel like any true artist could like see themselves in very easily listening to it. But because I had like when I listen to Kid A and In Rainbows, I just go like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this is so like it's like ecstasy. And this album is less ecstasy for me and more just like you get all pensive and start reflecting on the human condition in ways that you don't normally. And it's less like it's a little bit of a downer. A lot of this album is a bit of a downer for me, but in a good way. But I guess because it doesn't have those ecstasy moments that I have here that I hold close to heart, I can't put it in the S tier. But that's, again, it's all subjective. I'd still think it's way better than B tier. Like A tier for me is like objective good. S tier is like subjectively, oh my god, this is amazing, and I will always hold it dear kind of thing. That's how I'm rating these. I know that you're being a lot more logical, but for anybody who's curious on how I'm trying
I think time will be very kind to this record. I think it'll remain up there with their greatest things if they ever decide to put out another record again.
Do you think they're gonna?
It's literally been 8 years. They said they would come back, but they haven't.
I mean, now Tom York's working on.
I know they're all doing other stuff, but please, just give us another one.
I think that's going to be their last one. I really think it's their last one if they do it again.
And you know what? If they want to walk off into the sunset after that, let them go. They already keep the legacy intact.
So
all I care about is they're one of the few bands who really did not lose their touch. And there's a lot of artists like that who will eventually just start doing stuff where it's like they haven't written a good song in 20 years. Like that's honestly how I feel about Billy Corgan. As much as I love the early Smashing Pumpkins stuff, I could pretty much ignore the last 20 years of his career and not be missing anything. But Radiohead, no way. I can't ignore Moonshaped Pool.
Definitely. I mean, I hope that someday, if you and I are able to continue making music, we can take inspiration from them specifically, because they're the band that I always reference when I think of like, okay, how do I make a revolutionary album, or like do something that hasn't been done enough. It's very difficult to do something new, but like, you know, when you listen to Radiohead, it's almost like you've never heard anything like it, and there are a few bands that have done exactly that. And so just hearing them inspires me as a songwriter and an artist. And I get the vibe that you feel the same way. But I can't say much more about this band.
I think that's a good place to end it there.
Yeah. So I guess just shameless plug. You got back this freaking far. Look at the link in the description. Check out some of our older work. We got a new album coming. I don't know if we should like announce the name of it, but whatever. It's just called
Later.
But thank you for tuning in, and I don't know.
Go listen to some Radiohead.
Listen to some Radiohead, and cheers, I guess.